We're going to take a look at doing the one-way ANOVA. The one-way ANOVA is used when you are comparing two or more groups. If you have two groups, you could just use the independent samples t-test, which is nice because you can then choose to do either a one-tail or a two-tail test. With the one-way ANOVA, it's always a two-tail test. And in particular, when we do the one-way ANOVA, we're interested in whether does at least one group stand out compared to the other groups. If the one-way ANOVA is statistically significant, it doesn't tell us which group is different from the other groups, or if multiple groups are different from multiple other groups. It just says at least one group is different. To find out anything further, we'd have to do a post hoc test. So for now, we'll look at the one-way ANOVA. Our independent variable that we're exploring is whether practice format before an exam has an effect on our dependent variable, the psychology exam. To do the analysis, we'll click on the Analyze drop-down menu, then choose Compare Means and Proportions, and finally click on the one-way ANOVA. We'll go ahead and pick our independent variable, which is the practice format before exam. Having clicked on it, we'll move it over to the factor window. Next, we'll pick the dependent variable, which is psychology exam score, and we'll move it over to the dependent list window by clicking the arrow pointing to the right. Finally, we'll click on our options and choose descriptive and continue. Note that often you would also choose a post hoc test. For now, we'll click OK. And here are our results. So there were 3 different groups in this particular experiment. One group reread their notes before taking the psychology exam. Another group summarized in their own words the material before taking the exam. And the third group did a practice test using short answer prior to taking the psychology exam. And there are numerical differences between the groups. The one that did the practice test using a short answer with an 83.63 definitely appears to have done much better than the group that simply reread the notes at 71.19. So we don't know that there's any significant differences here, but at least numerically, if these turn out to be statistically significant, it's meaningful. To be able to do 12 points higher on an exam by choosing a different study method, that's pretty good. That could bump your results up a whole letter grade. Okay, then we take a look at the ANOVA. And the ANOVA lets us know, was the variation between the sample means, how did that compare with the variation among the scores? Like if you look at the scores and then you look at the sample means, does it look like it's about, a proper amount of variation, or is the variation among the sample means so much bigger than what you would expect by looking at the variation of the scores? That's kind of like what the one-way ANOVA does. And so we are looking here at the variation between groups, and our mean square for the variation between groups is 479.05. And our variation within groups is 71.63. So the F statistic, we divide the between groups variation by the within groups variation, the mean scores. We get an F of 6.688, which if there's nothing going on, the F would be typically around 1. So this is pretty noteworthy. And the significance is 0.004, which is much less than our alpha level of 0.05. So we definitely reject the null hypothesis. And what this is telling us is that, hey, that difference that we observed, we saw something like a 12-point difference between at least 2 of the conditions, that difference we observed was a lot bigger than what you would just expect due to random selection leading to slightly different sample means. So we know, at least from doing this, at least one of the sample means was statistically significantly different than the other means. Okay, let's do this in game mode now. So again, if we're going to do the one-way analysis, we click on the Analyze, then Compare Means and Proportions, and then the one-way ANOVA. Next, we'll select the independent variable. That's totally up to you whether you do independent variable first or dependent variable. So our independent variable is practice format before exam. And we put the independent variable in the factor list. And then our dependent variable is the psychology exam score, and that goes into the dependent list. And we'll go ahead and choose our options of descriptive statistics and continue. And again, I recommend sometimes playing with the post hoc options over here. We'll click OK. We have our descriptive results. And again, you can see what a big spread there is based upon the study method used, and that this difference is statistically significant.